So some quick questions. Who's taken a class or taught a class in Second Life in the audience? Any cognitive scientists in the audience? Good, I can make stuff up. Okay, so the next 10 minutes I want to talk about some of the mechanisms and challenges we've seen using Second Life for a wide variety of learning. I'm going to try to differentiate learning a little bit from education, although they're clearly intertwined. I am going to be guilty of largely skipping the digital divide issue. Second Life obviously is a resource hog, thus there are places you can use it right now and places you can't. The good thing is the number of places you can use it is accelerating quite quickly. Overall themes I'm going to be talking about certainly collaboration, how that interacts with experience. The fact that we've repeatedly seen educators in Second Life as the leaders in the space, the first people to try new things, the first people to prove out new approaches to collaboration, new business models. It's been very exciting to watch. And of course, what happens when you don't set out to build a pedagogic product? And Second Life is not built to be a learning environment. Normally I have to put up the I am not a lawyer sign when I'm giving talks. And in this case, let me just say that I'm not a professor. And more importantly, I am not an education theorist or a cognitive scientist. If you wanted those, go talk to Jim G. or Constance Steinkuhler, and if you haven't been talking to them, you should. You know, when we're talking about learning within the information economy, we often talk about the attention economy, right? And we're going to assume a more or less limitless, or at least zero marginal cost way of creating, sharing, and storing information. But of course, when we're talking about information in this context, we're really thinking about knowledge, and more important than knowledge, we're really talking about experience, right? It's how do we consume that knowledge, how do we create that knowledge together, how do we share that knowledge, and experience it as people in a culture, right? And what's cool is a lot of times we really get hung up on facts, but when we talk about facts with regards to education, I'd say that facts are in this category of necessary but not sufficient. In fact, I think you can argue that facts are kind of a solved problem. This is my daughter who, at age 3, I saw her take a book over to her laptop, and she can't read or anything, but she knows where what letters are on the keyboard, and type tiger into Wikipedia because she figured out that there were pictures there, right? And so, the facts are there. And in fact, we even know how to deliver the facts. We can get them there on phones, computers, and it's really interesting because the first time she's going to be denied access to information, denied access to facts, is going to be when she goes to school. Right? And so when we talk about this, all comes out of the cost latency discussion of information dissemination. Right? We can look at the fact that we've changed not just the method, but how we can get the information out there. Right? It's cheaper, we're many to many, and of course, because of that now, all school is fun and exciting and thrilling. It was kind of fun. Board plus student and CC Viant got 127 pictures, which I thought was kind of cool. So if we look at how we actually learn, it's interesting because there's a lot of theory out there that if you talk to the education theorists, they've been thinking about this a long time. And it's words that aren't necessarily familiar to you if you're not in the field. So legitimate peripheral participation is the idea that we learn best from apprenticeships. We learn best from other people. We learn best doing things together. Oh, the movie that you're watching is 5 people building a house together in Second Life. Right? This is the experience in Second Life that has proved so compelling to sharing information. It's the fact that when you're putting a house together, you're doing it with other people. You're doing it in real time. You're doing it collaboratively. Situated learning is the opposite of how we generally teach. We generally teach through skill and drill. Learn this information, and then we will test you on it on Friday. And if you don't pass the test, you don't get to move on. Situated learning is the idea that you know why you're learning. You're learning information that's important to you. Heterogeneous learning, there's almost no end of study that the worst possible way to teach people is to take people of the same age, same background, same socioeconomic class, put them in a room and throw information at. But of course, that's all of conventional education. It's a lot more convenient to put people of the same age group and geographic locations together. On-demand learning is one of the holy grails in education here. The idea that learners can learn when they need the information. Because that tends to situate it, it tends to be an optimized path. And of course, amateur to amateur education that we've all been talking about on this panel, and we'll keep talking about through this whole conference, is the idea that you have peer-to-peer learning and peer-to-peer education. You can learn from each other. And of course, because nothing is really new ever, Ludwig Vygotsky wrote about all of this back in the 40s, and the idea that we learn by doing. And that's exactly what we see within Second Life over and over and over again. People are comfortable experimenting, comfortable playing in the environment, and and learning what they need to do when they need to learn it, and acquiring the friends and social networks they need to continue that learning. I apologize for not having really good data on the main grid of Second Life. Second Life is broadly divided into an area for adults and an area for teens. I did some surveying of teens, and we had almost 400 respondents. And what's interesting is if you surveyed them on how they learn to make their avatars look better, how to make better attachments, how to make better outfits, how to write script code, all of those things, the number one place that they learned from was their friends. Right? They talked to their friends and said, well, how do we learn to do that? And they clearly inserted a blank slide just for fun. And so what you have is a place in Second Life where you have a very efficient production of experience, because your production environment is your experience environment, is your distribution environment, is your consumption environment. Right? Everything you're doing publicly. And we see many educators in Second Life using this from mainstream education institutions. This was the Cyber 1 law class at Harvard Law School, where they taught a law class simultaneously in Second Life and in the real world, and watched a migration of kids from the real world law class to the virtual world law class. And depending upon who you talk to, this was either because they were more comfortable asking questions, or they preferred to take class in their underwear. I'll leave to the audience to decide which of those was true. But there is a fair amount of supporting evidence that when you give people pseudonymity, they will ask questions. And when you think about challenges in education environments, how often is the biggest problem the unasked question, the idea that the question might be stupid? So one of the things we see within Second Life is there seems to be this idea that easy is this really important piece of education. If you don't make stuff easy, people aren't going to do anything with it. And we've certainly heard over the last few days, and we're going to hear tonight, about the fact that people will do amazing things when you give them the ability to collaborate, and you give them flexibility, and you give them reasons to learn. Within Second Life, about 17% of the people who ever log in write scripting code. And if you've ever used Second Life, you can attest to the fact that the script code in Second Life is like C, only harder. I'm sorry I wrote it in a week, it's my fault. But it's not easy to use. You have a lot of people who aren't programmers. This is from a demographic that's 50-50 men and women, it's multinational, it's quite a bit older than normal tech early adopters. And why are they doing that? Well, because you can do cool stuff with the scripting language. You're incented to go out there and learn. It's really, really fun what you can do. And when you want to connect Second Life to the web, or you want to do Web 2.0 type stuff, use the scripting language. People have written millions of scripts in Second Life. So we talked a lot about sort of what's different, right? Communication costs, the fact that we have this breakdown between amateur and expert. One of the things we see within Second Life is that it's inherently multidisciplinary. We see a lot of people really crossing boundaries to learn from each other. We also see people using the communication space because they can build trust to hack systems. There's a very active group within Second Life, which is a group of grad school students talking with each other how to be better grad school students, right? Because if you're in, say, medical school, you might not want to help your close competitor, but helping a random fellow grad student might be in your best interest. So what about the dinosaurs, the sort of existing universities and institutions that are out there? Well, a lot of them are actually taking advantage of the tech. This is Hong Kong University that's actually built a space just to teach other universities how to teach. We see a lot of learners being very active in Second Life, but I think the more important question is if you're a teacher, an educator, a tutor, can you use this space to connect to people? This is the International Space Flight Museum in Second Life, where a bunch of rocket scientists, the European Space Agency folks, are consistently pulled in classes about space flight, what's going on in space science, and they're doing it for fun. They're doing it because this is what they're passionate about, this is what they like talking about. And so they hold classes there all the time. And so where I think you guys can help, first of all, we've talked a lot obviously about copyright here. When you move into virtual worlds in particular, copyright gets really messy because everything is a creative act, everything is fixed, and everything's transmitted. So there is a very meta need to educate people on what's going on, because things like a dance that wouldn't be copyrightable in the real world is when you're in a virtual world. Taking advantage of the fact that you have users from all over the world who are talking to brought up the idea of translations. Well, Second Life now has a voice over IP client built into it, right? So why not connect on-demand translators when you need simultaneous translation? Share the knowledge that you're good at, share what you are an expert on, because everybody in this room is an expert. And stay under my 10 minutes. If you want to learn more, secondlife.com/education, there's an educator mailing list that has about 2,000 educators actively on it. And then the SimTeach wiki at simteach.com is a really good collection of all the education going on in Second Life.